Persona 3 has eluded me for the longest time. I initially started to play it back in 2021 after I had completed Persona 5 Royal the year before, and then I spent the summer playing Persona 4 Golden, and I was hurt ever so deeply by how much I didn't somehow like Persona 4 Golden, but at the time I did really enjoy my time with Persona 3. I got 10-ish hours in, I got to just before you get Fuka in-game, and I was having a really good time actually with it, but for some reason I just dropped it and never went back to it, and I don't really know why. I eventually just wanted to wait for a re-release to come out, I think, and I thought that would just come pretty quickly because Persona 4 had just been ported to PC the year before, and I was like, well, obviously Persona 3 is going to come to PC and stuff this year, right guys? And then a modern release came, thank God, but it was portable, not FES, because they clearly knew I wanted to play FES for the anime cutscenes and explorable environments, then get the portable later to have a FMC run. So, despite me, thanks Atlas. But at this time there were rumours flying around about a Persona 3 remake, and myself knowing that would eventually be the definitive way of playing it, I waited on it. And I kept waiting for like 18 months till they actually announced it. Well, technically I waited until Atlas leaked it a week before they announced it, and then I waited another 8 months for it to come out, and well, we're here now, and that's all that matters. Persona is a series that means a lot to me, and that's a topic for another video entirely, but Persona 3 had to land after Persona 4 didn't for me, and Reload eventually did. You see, there's something I haven't mentioned yet about Persona 3, and that is that I have been spoiled on every story reveal except for one. Now you might be thinking, what is that one reveal? Well, probably not the ones you're thinking of, to be honest with you. It's one that happens in December, if that narrows it down, which it probably doesn't. But that's the best I can get without spoiling it outright for you, which we'll get to later, don't worry about that. Having Persona 3 spoiled is something that has happened pretty regularly for me over the past few years, and it all started when I got spoiled on the ending, on the day it happens, March 5th, 3 years ago. Frankly, the reason I put off playing Persona 3 for so long was partly because of the remake rumours, but also because I kinda wanted to try and forget the spoilers I knew going into Persona 3, and that didn't work. Hey, it's worth a try, I guess? I don't know, it never actually works, I don't know why I do it. Not only was I spoiled on the ending on that particular date 3 years ago, but I also got spoiled on it on the same date every year later, and I expect it to be in full HD this year thanks to the remake. The point is, Persona 3 is probably the most spoiled game of all time for me, because outside of the ending, over the last 3 years I have been spoiled on a lot, and it turns out the vast majority of the story. And going into Persona 3 Reload, I tried to put this to the back of my mind, and I succeeded for the first 30 or 40-ish hours, but after that, I sadly came to the realization that every single plot reveal has been spoiled for me over the past few years. With this realization, I soured on the experience a little, mostly because at heart, I'm a story man. I go to games to be immersed in worlds and taking the stories, characters, and reveals. Having most of those things spoiled before getting to play it myself generally always takes away from the experience for me. Obviously, this isn't the case for everyone because everyone's different. Hell, even doing some incredibly light research, and I mean like just googling it and looking at titles light research, there's conflicting opinions on whether or not spoilers ruin an experience or make it better. I'm obviously in the camp of the former, and that hasn't changed much after I've beaten Persona 3 Reload, but something happened at the end of Persona 3 Reload that really made me cast a second light over my entire playthrough. So, settle in. Today, we're talking about spoilers, how they affect me, and Persona 3 Reload. There's going to be spoilers for Persona 3 Reload in this video, but don't worry, I will try and mark them out with timestamps and tell you about it before I talk about them. So, here's a weird video about Persona 3 Reload where I don't talk too much about the game itself, but I talk a lot about how I interact with media, and how spoilers really affect me. So, let's get into it. Spoilers are a fickle thing. Some stories aren't ruined at all by being spoiled on certain elements. For example, I know a bit about the later games in the Kingdom Hearts series, but I haven't played them, meaning I've technically been spoiled on those to a small degree, but I don't really consider myself being spoiled on them though, mostly because Kingdom Hearts is an incredibly dense series with a ton of plot reveals, but in the same vein, I've also been spoiled on one of, if not the biggest twists of every mainline Zelda game. This is a way bigger deal to me, not only because Zelda is one of my favorite franchises, but also because Zelda games tend to have one or two big plot beats, and then the rest of the game is build up and payoff to that particular twist. And yes, that isn't true for all of them. Breath of the Wild is a very unspoilable game thanks to the nature of its story, but for the majority of them, it isn't, and it's kind of the reason I haven't played them yet. I'm being completely honest with you, spoilers ruin my enjoyment of a thing tenfold. Like I said at the start, I'm a story man. My enjoyment of a thing comes from the shock, wonder, and awe that the story reveals and all of its plot details and plot twists. I love that stuff. Spoilers inherently just ruin that. Knowing the reveals going into a game ruins the investment I can have in it, because I like to be washed over by the experience and take the story as it comes, enjoying every little plot twist. This makes spoilers one of my biggest enemies when it comes to media consumption, and I don't think I need to explain why much more than that. Shit just sucks when you get the wind of a reveal taken out of you by looking at a character's wiki page, which has happened to me multiple times by the way, or just scrolling through wherever you're using and the algorithm just spits out information you didn't know about a piece of media you intended on consuming. Especially when it's a twist or type of twist you don't think you'll like. Some stories I can be glad I wasn't spoiled on the experience going in, because I don't end up liking the stories of those games, but enjoy all of the other aspects of them quite a bit. A recent example of this actually would be Tears of the Kingdom, a game I dearly love on every front except for the story. When I go into a game with the knowledge of a twist, I end up not being able to engage with a piece of media as much as I could without knowing the plot going into it. It's probably a byproduct of the fact that my investment in the story is pretty much removed depending on how much of it I have spoiled for me, and you can simply put it down to that the most fun part of any media experience for me is gone, and therefore I inherently have less fun with that piece of media. There are exceptions to every rule, of course, like how, for example, I was spoiled on the vast majority of Xenoblade 1, but luckily my spoilers started and finished at the middle of the game, so the rest of the game was still new to me and pretty much really enjoyable. Basically, I don't think there's a game or anime where I've been spoiled on the story and I really got my entire enjoyment out of that thing, in part thanks to the fact I was spoiled on it. It's something I try to be mindful of when I play or watch media where I've been spoiled on something. Trying to take media on its own terms is one of my core pillars of consuming stuff after all, but the amount of emphasis I place on story means that most of the time I just simply can't do that. It ends up being a sort of weight that hangs over me. However much I try to forget these spoilers, they don't seem to leave. It kind of just act as something weighing the experience down for the entire duration of it, which really sucks, honestly, if I'm being frank with you. But this is a video about Persona 3 Reload, and now we're going to finally talk about that game because this necessary preamble is finally out of the way. Right, so like I mentioned at the beginning, Persona 3 Reload enraptured me for 30 hours, even knowing the spoilers I did. It's a game that has immaculate vibes and just makes you feel at home right away. This was enough to keep me going for a while, blissfully unaware of just how spoiled I was on the game. Little did I know that it turns out everything I knew was actually just the end game, and the stuff I didn't know in the early game were just smaller reveals that led up to the larger reveals that I had already had spoiled for me. So if you're curious at this point what I knew going into Persona 3 Reload, I'm just going to list everything off to you, just so you can understand what I knew going in so we're on the same page. Skip to this timestamp if you don't want to get spoiled on anything in Persona 3 Reload. I am going to list off the majority of the plot twists just so you know. I feel like if you're this far into a Persona 3 video about spoilers and all that stuff, you probably played the game already, but I thought I'd do this just in case you haven't played the game and, you know, want to keep it a secret. So, there you go. Right, okay, so let me just list these out for you. Chidori's death, but not the fact she comes back, which I didn't even get in my game, which is quite cool. Mitsuru's father's death, Shinji's death, Ikutsuki being a villain, Ryoji being a twist character of some sort, but I didn't know the twist, but I knew he was a twist character to some degree. The final boss being the moon to some degree as well. That's a weird one, but I knew that. And of course, finally, the ending, which means the death of the main character at the end of the game. The only thing I wasn't spoiled on was Ryoji's entire deal. It was incredibly cool to find that out. It was such a cool reveal, and he was just a part of Makoto for 10 years, and me knowing how the game ends makes that reveal a bit cooler too, honestly. But yeah, the vast majority of the plot's details were spoiled for me, and sadly, Persona 3 isn't the video game form of Code Geass, where there's twists every 10 minutes. What I had spoiled for me was just straight up the majority of what happens in the game. So for the first 30 to 40 hours until I got to October, I kind of lived in bliss of just taking the game in, but After that, I begun to realize that I just hit the first spoiler I knew about, and that with only a few months in game left, meaning my assumption was at that point that every month would contain a different spoiler I knew about until we hit the end of the game. So with that, I started to sour on the experience, not because it was even getting worse, honestly, the inverse actually, it was ramping up really well. I was just incredibly sad that I just knew the outcomes to every arc in the game because I was really enjoying the time I spent with it. This eventually just led to me really wanting to beat the game and becoming more disgruntled about the experience as time went on. Like I said, the story was actually really good and a few of the social links even made me cry. Shout out to my goat Fuka, by the way. It just sucked knowing what was happening at any given point, and this led to the experience becoming more of an obligation to see through instead of a piece of media I was taking on its own terms. This is the case for a long time during the game. Like I said, I hit October in about 30 to 40 hours, and I beat the game in 70. So there was a large portion of this game where I didn't really enjoy myself, mostly just thanks to how I let the spoilers affect my enjoyment of the playthrough. This is only compounded by the fact that the reveal in December that I didn't know about was cool as hell and wowed me. I know that the rest of the story probably would have done that too had I not known all the details about it. So, fast forward to the end, and I was about to tap out of playing for the night a few hours from the end, because I was purely just feeling tired after about 4 hours of playing it into the night, and I really wanted to try and enjoy the ending of the game, because despite me being spoiled on it, people have praised it for 20 years. It's going to be incredible, I know that for a fact. But I was in call with a friend who'd also just beat the game, so I just decided to do it that night, there and then. This might have been the best decision I've made in years. From here on, the video will feature pretty heavy audio and visual spoilers for the end of Persona 3, so here's a timestamp for where they end, but this video really pretty heavily hinges on the point I'm about to make by using the ending of Persona 3, so I felt like I kind of had to spoil basically for the rest of the video, but here's a timestamp in case you want to skip it, just like earlier. Going into the ending, not only was the final boss fight sick, the Arcana is the means by which all is revealed, after all. It has one of the best final boss themes I've heard, and I loved it, it was so good. Then the final day of the game happens, and you do the standard go and talk to everyone you do at the end of a Persona game, which is always a favourite part of mine. I love that shit. I go and talk to Yukari, one of my favourite characters in the game, and she wraps up and gives closure to her social link in a scene that was really nice. Every character's final conversation neatly wraps up their social links, and I couldn't have asked for a better final day. It felt like a true final rank to all of their social links, showing you what they took from the link and what they're going to be doing next. It's great. The reason I say all that is because I had spent the back portion of the game thinking to myself about how some social links didn't have the closure I wanted out of them, and was missing maybe 1 or 2 ranks to really make it hit home. I was holding out for these final day conversations to do that, and boy did they delivered it immaculately. I loved it. When that happened, my bitter, jaded old shell began to crumble, and I remembered just how much I loved Persona 3 Reload. Persona 3 Reload was a game I didn't even want to play at the start of February. And as soon as I put the disc into my system, I fell in love. I played for 10 hours a day a couple times, just like when I beat Persona 5 Royal, my favourite game of all time, in 9 days. The vibes are immaculate, they bring you in like a warm embrace, the UI is the best in the industry, with its only peers being other Persona games. The combat is fantastic, with clever additions like making the Navi more of an active participant in combat. The music! As the cutscenes began to play leading up to it, seeing the stairs, this moment right here, knowing what was coming, actually made it worse to bear. There was a pit opening up in my stomach, genuine pain in my chest, real goddamn fucking emotions happening to me as I was about to end this game that I thought were genuinely impossible for me to feel during this, especially during the ending, which I had spoiled for me so many times over the years. When his eyes felt heavy, the heavy weight on my shoulders was gone. No longer was I burdened by the spoilers, I was just in the moment. I cried so much. I think I cried for like 2 hours after I beat Persona 3 Reload, purely because not only is the ending like amazing, one of the best endings I have ever seen in anything ever, frankly, because I was able to enjoy it to the fullest, even knowing what was going to happen. I loved Persona 3 Reload, and I was too jaded by spoilers to realize it, too hung up on the details that I knew were coming to really enjoy the ride, and it didn't hit me fully until I beat the game. I felt nostalgic for a time that was only an hour ago. I felt immense happiness that I actually really loved Persona 3, but at the same time I also felt immense regret. Regret that I let myself get caught up in the spoilers I knew, and that it dragged down my opinion of the game for the entire back half when I didn't even dislike what I was playing, man. Even during this moment where I was reflecting on the game, I couldn't list a single bad thing about the back half of the game. Just the fact that I was being a stick in the mud about it. The game was actually great the entire way through, I was just too stupid to see it. And a few days removed from beating Persona 3 Reload, where I'm writing the script and recording this video, I'm still reeling from this ending. I've teared up just thinking about the end of the game again. It's a really, really powerful moment. This has never happened to me before. Ever. And I think that's important to state. Spoilers have generally taken away from every experience I have had where I knew about the plot going in. Persona 3 Reload was different. Granted, it took until I beat the game to realize this, but as soon as I had the realization that being spoiled on Persona 3 Reload wasn't as big of a deal as I made it out to be, I wanted to start up another playthrough immediately. Now, I'm not going to do that, but if the year ends up having a dry spot with no releases, I might actually just boot up a run of Persona 3 Reload, something I wouldn't have thought in a million years I'd be saying 3 weeks ago. Purely because I really want to play Persona 3 Reload and enjoy the back half without being stuck on these spoilers I knew. Going forward, I think this probably has some rather large ramifications on how I engage with stuff I've been spoiled on. I think generally I want to stop avoiding media I've been spoiled on in hopes of forgetting those spoilers because it never works, it's stupid, I don't know why I do it. The only time it did work was when I watched the quintessential quintuplets and got to the end and remembered after seeing the resolution that I actually remembered looking up the ending years prior and just totally forgot about it. I also think I should try to stop to the best of my ability going into something that I've had spoiled for me being kind of sad about the idea that I've been spoiled. There's definitely positives and negatives to it. Mostly negatives, to be honest with you, but you can try and piece together where foreshadowing is, pick up on little details that allude to the plot beat you've had spoiled for you. And this can also be very funny in things where you've been spoiled on, because you can end up putting dots together that are not actually dots to connect, and end up laughing at yourself 20 hours later when the spoiler you know hits and it had nothing to do with the plot beat you thought it did. It's kind of a reverse spoiler in a way, where you unspoil yourself by relating something unrelated to the thing you know and end up being surprised at the unrelated plot beat and the plot beat you knew. So I think in general it's a good idea to not focus on the spoilers you know for a thing while you're consuming it. I know firsthand it's really hard to not focus on them, as you might have gotten the main villain of a game spoiled for you, or a character death, or even who ends up with who in a rom-com. But after playing through and sitting with Persona 3 Reload for a few days, that's what I want to do. It's not an easy task to just fundamentally change how you engage with media overnight, and I'm not going to stop being on the pulse for avoiding spoilers, but it's a nice mindset to have, and one I will try to have as I go forward. I don't think I came out of Persona 3 Reload enriched from knowing how it ends and the journey ended up being more important than the destination. I came out of it so happy because the destination itself was so good that it outweighed my resentment for knowing those spoilers. The ending, although being spoiled for me, still hit like a truck and made me kind of realize that I just had been playing the game wrong for the past 70 hours. It made me nostalgic for a game I had just beaten. It changed me. I think Persona 3 Reload is an experience that will stick with me forever, and I'm ever so grateful I get to say that. I hope you either enjoyed hearing me ramble about spoilers for however long this is, or took something away from this video that you can use when it comes to spoilers too. Maybe I will go and play those Zelda games now this experience has changed how I want to interact with the various pieces of media I've been spoiled on. I've been meaning to play them for over, oh Christ, half a decade. Oh my god, that's a long time. Jesus Christ. Was Breath of the Wild that long ago? But I think it's fair to say that this experience has helped me come to terms with the fact that spoilers just happen, and you shouldn't let them sour an experience for you, even if you don't like knowing something going into it. They don't usually enrich your experience, and in my case they generally take away from it, but holding that over yourself isn't something you should really do. Just try and take in the vibes, world, and story, and by doing that I think I'll enjoy media I've been spoiled on quite a bit more, keeping that in mind. Anyway, thanks for watching, subscribe if you liked what you saw and all that stuff, and yeah, I'll be seeing you around.